I'm going to start before I turn off the lights because David has left his camera there and I'm supposed to do an introduction. So welcome to Brown Bag History today. We're going to be talking about mining in the Illecillewaet region. So I think when we think about mining history in the region, everybody knows about the Big Bend. There was a gold rush in the Big Bend. Everybody knows about mining in the Lardo, but there's not too much known about the mining that took place in the Illecillewaet. So basically between here and Rogers Pass. The people that were coming into the region were looking everywhere for minerals. So there was really no area that wasn't a possibility for mining exploration. Some of the first miners that I've been able to identify were some of the early people that were coming here in 1885 as part of railway construction. There was a man named Thomas Bain who came to this area in 1885 and started mining in the Illecillewaet area. That he first became famous in the mining world of the province as the discoverer of the Lorry mines at Illecillewaet and have done vegan mines south of Flat Creek. And in 1889 he went back to Ontario and got married and brought his wife out, and she was camping, staying with him at Illecillewaet. And she said that there were several decent women there and about 200 others. Talked about it as a wild mining camp. So we don't really think about it as I said, as a big area, but there was quite a bit of mining activity that was going on there, and there's some fairly big camps going on in the area as well. I've just been trying to figure out this map, and I left my key in the other room. But I think anybody who wants to discover this a little bit closer, I have the original map in our collection. But it talks about the Lanark mine. It would have been right in this area. So we've got Illecillewaet here, and Flat Creek, and then Albert Canyon down there. So a lot of the activity was based in that area. So as I said, that the earlier mines that we were aware of were right in the Lanark area, and then Flat Creek would have been in this area. You can see there's up in here, we'll be talking about the Waverley Tangier mine, and it was up the North Fork of the Illecillewaet, so quite a bit farther north of the main line. So this is the basic area that we're talking about in here. I have a feeling this talk is going to be a bit disjointed. I felt like I was kind of really in the sort of discovery mode just the last few days of, because this is a talk I haven't done before, and I was finding a lot of new information, and I'm at the state now where there's still a lot of information that I think I can continue to do. I think there's lots of newspaper articles that are available that I could research. So I only have 12 pages of information right now. I think this is one of these topics where I could continue to go on and on and on. We have some, as I said, I was thinking at first this was an area I was going to have to really dig to find anything. But we have the Minister of Mines reports going back to 1897. And each year, the Minister of Mines produced a report, and he would have his gold commissioners or gold agents in each region do survey work or do sort of an inspection of the mines in each region. So this is a write-up about all of the work that was going on in all the mines in BC. And we have not quite a complete set, but we have quite a few of these. And so I was able to get quite a bit of information out of these, and even a couple of photographs and diagrams, which was really helpful as well. This is a diagram that came out of one of the mining division reports from the report for the year 1917. And it doesn't show the Illecillewaet, so it's missing the area that where we're talking about the Lanark mine, but it does include the Waverley mine, and we'll be talking a little bit about that too. And as you can see how far up that is from the it's around Sorcerer Mountain, so quite a ways up the North Fork of the Illecillewaet. As I said, a lot of the activity was centered between Albert Canyon and Illecillewaet, and there were good-sized settlements in both those areas. This was a CPR station at Albert Canyon in 1900. So the CPR had they had a station, and they even had a roundhouse at Albert Canyon, and then as well there was the mining activity going on there. This was the Waverley Mine shed at Albert Canyon, which was near the station in 1897. There was a large company that was operating there at that time. I'll talk about that in just a minute. And so this is showing the Albert Canyon. So it's a different view of the station, and then the CPR water tank, and then the Waverley Tangier mine store right there. And one of the families that was quite involved in mining in the region was the Woolsey family, and I'll be talking about them a bit later as well. This was Mr. and Mrs. Dave Woolsey at their home at Albert Canyon around 1900. So there was a good-sized settlement there at the time. And then Illecillewaet as well. There were stores. There was a population of probably still a couple of hundred people in the early 1900s. This was the hotel at Illecillewaet. So there's Thomas Bain and John Boyd, there's two partners from Ontario, were the ones that started the Lanark mine and the Dunvegan mine, also in the area. And they named it after their hometowns in Ontario. There was a note in the Vancouver Daily World of November 26th, 1889. This was when the local smelter was trying to get in operation and was trying to secure sources of ore for their smelter. And said, so November of 1889, the first car of ore was received by the smelter from Illecillewaet and was put through the crushing process. And that it came from the Dunvegan mine of Bain and Boyd and Company. So they were continuing to get some supplies of ores from the Illecillewaet. There was the Green Brothers and the fellow named McKinnon, and a few other mines that were operating in that area. Also, one of the other early miners in the Albert Canyon area was Ole Sandberg, and anybody who's used the Nordic trails will know that name. Is the Ole Sandberg hut, and he was one of the early prospectors in Albert Canyon. He was there in the 1880s, and he died in 1943 in the Caribou. He left this area but was continuing to prospect in the province. And so he located some of the early mines in the Albert Canyon area and spent quite a few years in that area. And of course he was credited with being the first person to introduce skis in Revelstoke when he appeared in town in the 1880s wearing his skis. And also mentioned in the 1890 that they were building trails in the North Fork of the Illecillewaet area to access some of the claims. There was one person that said they had a gold quartz claim of low-grade ore, and Andrew Abrahamson of the Abrahamson family that had the Central Hotel in town, they also had mining claims in Albert Canyon, and there was notes from 1891 saying that he was engaged in working on the tunnel on the Wild Fox, on which property he has great hopes of striking it rich before long. The tunnel is in about 57 feet and about 30 feet from the main ledge. He says there is more snow in the mountains than there was last time this year, it being fully 6 feet on the level at Albert Canyon. That's March of 1891. So in March of 1897, a company known as the Goldfields of British Columbia Limited was incorporated in England, the capital of 600,000 pounds. And they had 19 claims on the north branch of the Illecillewaet above Albert Canyon. And among those was the Waverley, and that's the one where I was showing you was way up the North Fork. Said this is the only one on which development has been done to any extent, though some has been done on the Tangiers. The ledge on which these claims are staked is 9 feet wide and is traceable in places for half a mile on the surface. Said there can be no doubt that the Goldfields of British Columbia have acquired a valuable property on these claims. They were saying that, now I don't really understand all this assay information. I think that was one of my problems with this. There was a lot of the language that I wasn't really familiar with, so there's maybe somebody here can explain some of this to me later. So the solid ore went 28 ounces in silver, 1/3 in gold, 10.25% copper, and 31% lead. He said the Tangier is more of a gold proposition, going to 2.5 to 3 ounces in gold. So a lot of the problem with a lot of these early mines was there was a real difficulty in getting into them, in getting the ores out, and building the buildings that they needed in the area, and just keeping the amount of capital that they needed. We have some information on the Tangier Waverley Mine Corporation from a couple of sources. One is from the family of a man named William Hazel, who was the mining manager at the Waverley Tangier mine. So we have actually copies of correspondence between him and their parent company. And a lot of the parent companies for a lot of these corporations were in England. So they'd provide the capital for these companies. And quite often, there wasn't a real understanding of the terrain here. There wasn't an understanding of what was involved in having a mining operation, and there was a lot of potential for people on the ground to exaggerate what was happening. So it sort of set up this situation where it was really easy for the companies in England to overcapitalize the company, and then they get into difficulties and weren't able to get the ore out that they wanted to, and so they would go under. That happened with the Waverley Tangier mine as well. One of the other sources was a lot of information that came from a man named Fred Forrest, and he lived in Albert Canyon for 50 years. He was born in Leith, Scotland in 1872, and he's had a really interesting life. He actually spent some time in the Belgian Congo in the early 1890s, and the Belgian Congo is a pretty horrible place. And just reading between the lines of some of the correspondence, I think he was suffering mental illness of some sort as a result of his experiences there. And basically, it sounds like his father sent him to Canada, that he became a bit of a problem for the family, and Canada was a good place to send problem children. So he was sent off to Canada and ended up at Albert Canyon. And his father actually managed to get him on the payroll of the Goldfields of British Columbia Limited, which was in charge of the Waverley and Tangier mine. So he was involved with that. There's actually an article in the papers that came from his estate from June of 1899, by which point the Tangier had closed down. It looked like it was really in operation between 1896 and 1899. This article said, at this time last year, the market value of the shares of the goldfield and the shares of the two subsidiary companies, the Waverley and the Tangier, would have totaled about £750,000. We ask, where are those prices now? Such value as is put upon the shares by the market is only nominal. Concern about Mr. John Grant, who oversold the properties to the company and made it over 150% of his original investment. So that was, in a nutshell, that was what happened to a lot of these mining companies. That was certainly the case with the Waverley Tangiers. So in the 1897 Minister of Mines report, there's a lot of mention about the Lanark mine. And these photographs actually came out of the Minister of Mines reports. And it's quite astounding to think that that building was actually constructed probably in about 1896 for the Lanark mine, which would have been, it was referred to as being right on the CPR sighting of CPR point of Laurie. It said, this was another case where the inspector who wrote this report for the Minister of Mines is concerned about how they've gone about it. So here's what he had to say. It has so far proved to be very disappointing to the Illecillewaet Fraser River and Caribou Goldfields Limited, as the amount and value of the ore reported to be in sight to the company has since proved to be utterly at variance with the results obtained in the mining milling of this ore body. So there's another example of somebody exaggerating the value of the ores. So the management of this mine incurred a large and premature expenditure by the hurried erection of a concentrating mill, tramway, and expensive building before the mine had been developed enough to warrant this outlay. So necessary, for various reasons, were these buildings considered, that they were erected in midwinter at a far greater cost than would have been required later. At this mine, the first tenet of good mining was disregarded, in that instead of commencing on a vigorous plan of development and search for other ore chutes, a large gang of men was set to work to stope out all of the ore in sight, which they did, with the consequence that when this ore body was exhausted and nothing had been done to look for more, work came to a standstill. The most important ore body was found on the Lanark Claim in this group that lies about 1.5 miles north and 2,500 feet above the small station of Laurie on the main line of the CPR, a few miles east of Revelstoke. The very precipitous mountains of the Selkirk Range here consist of steeply tilted, contorted carbonaceous schists interbedded with narrow bands of limestone, similar to the formations found further south in the Trout Lake Division. And they also talked about this tramway that was built. So the auto-wire rope tramway with two spans, each over 2,000 feet long in the clear, a total length of 6,550 feet, and difference in elevation between terminals of 2,640 feet, capacity 100 tons in 10 hours, gave excellent satisfaction, and the cost of tramming down the ore to the mill was about 30 cents per ton. The concentrator was erected at the track of the CPR, and the necessary power was got by throwing a dam across the Illecillewaet River and building 3,000 feet of fluming. An electric power and lighting plant was also installed. The future of the property now depends upon the results of extensive developing and prospecting that will now have to be done. And should chutes of good ore be found, then every facility for its convenient transport and milling will be at hand. So they're saying, yes, it's great that they have this stuff in place, but they felt that it was premature, and that really did come to be the case. So by the next year, 1898, there wasn't a lot of discussion about the Lanark mine, and then we have the copy of the Selkirk Range by A.O. Wheeler, which was the geographic survey of the Selkirk Range. And he talked about some of the subsequent mining activity. So, you know, those buildings were there, all that work was in place in 1897, 1898, and by 1905, he describes it as an abandoned property. So I think that was another case where they overextended themselves. So this is what A.O. Wheeler said in his report that was published in 1905. At 2.5 miles from Illecillewaet is seen the prettily situated but deserted mining camp of Laurie. In a little grassy flat on the opposite side of the river is placed a fine hotel, office and manager's residence, and to the right a number of miners' cottages. The river is crossed by a bridge. Near the track, a brand new concentrator, equipped with the latest machinery, was convenient for loading ore onto the cars. Perched high up on the perpendicular face of the cliff is the bunkhouse, near the mouth of the main shaft. From this point, the ore was carried in iron buckets along a steel wire cable to the concentrator, 3,000 feet below. The cable was suspended over a deep rocky gulch to an open woodwork tower, erected on a projecting spur, midway between the bunkhouse and the concentrator, from which point it descended sheer to the latter. It was customary for the miners to ascend and descend in the buckets. The cable has now been removed, but I should think it must have been a trip requiring much nerve. That's just a little sidebar here. If you ever get a chance to read the Selkirk Range, it's probably the most interesting government report ever produced. It's just beautifully written as well. So he said that the company owning these buildings had consolidated the group of which the Lanark, Maple Leaf, and other well-known claims formed a part, and had commenced operations on a somewhat extensive scale. The ore is a rich galena, but through some miscalculation was never found in sufficient quantity to pay, and the very large sums of money expended in the building were practically thrown away, for recently the concentrator and machinery have been sold and removed to the Kootenay mining district. Wasn't really until about the reports around 1913 that I was starting to see some activity again in the Lanark mine area. They talked about it in the 1913 report, and then in 1916 mentioned that the Lanark had shipped 10 cars of ore during the year, which netted about $900 a car. The sinking shafts and drifting to warrant enough ore for a plant that they were erecting. The lower levels were carrying so much zinc that they found it necessary to make a concentration. And again, they were erecting a modern mill that would process 75 tons a day capacity. So they expect to ship a 40-ton car of concentrates about every 3 days, or 10 cars a month. And then 1917 report, it again talks about the work that's being done there. A new investor was involved, and a new manager. It also said that David Wolsey is developing a group of 7 claims situated on Silver Creek at a distance of approximately 7 miles west of Albert Canyon. There's another picture of the Lanark mine. Wasn't sure of the date on that. I have it dated about 1920s. It was probably a little earlier than that. It's probably around this period that we're talking about here, the 1916, 1918 period. This is achieved from a map of the 1923 of Mount Revelstoke National Park, but it shows in here the wire cable, so that's actually where the tramway went up from the Lanark mine. So in the 1918 report, they talked quite a bit again about the Lanark mine, that it was continuing to operate, and then they talked about the Wolsey Creek mine, and said that this was David Woolsey, and he had family members living in here and living in this area until fairly recently. They had 7 claims, and I'm not sure who these were named after, but the claims were named Alice, Helena, Nellie E., Bee, May, Cora, and Joy. They were situated on the east fork of Silver Creek, which flows into the Illecillewaet River at a point about 2 miles west of Albert Canyon Station. Elevation of the camp was 2,000 feet above Albert Canyon. David Woolsey had taken a lease and a bond on the property in 1917, and then in 1918 the property had been sold to the Mining Corporation of Canada, and there was a man named Arthur V. Claiborne, who was the president of the Vancouver Chamber of Mines, and he was responsible for that deal going through. He came into the area in October of 1918 to inspect the property, and he was being led into the area by Gus Hedstrom, who was a well-known miner in this region, and he ended up falling off a cliff. So the newspaper said that this Claiborne meets tragic death at Silver Creek. That the deceased gentleman had become a well-known figure on the streets of Revelstoke. In company with Gus Hedstrom, Claiborne went up the mountain at Silver Creek with the purpose of examining more closely a vein which had showed up pretty well on a previous trip. Mr. Hedstrom had just warned Mr. Claiborne to be careful on his footing when without a moment's warning, the loose stuff on which he had been standing, and which was rendered slippery by the rain which was then falling, suddenly gave way from under him, and he was precipitated over an embankment of some 15 or 16 feet, alighting on his head, inflicting a wound that rendered him unconscious. His body continued to roll down the mountainside a distance of some 500 feet, stopping at a couple of trees which presented further descent. The body was somewhat bruised by the descent, but he continued to breathe for about an hour before succumbing to his injuries. And there's a creek in the area named after him in 1923, Claiborne Creek, that flows southwest into Woolsey Creek. So I have quite a few more maps here. This one is showing some of the mining claims in the area as well. This is from the map of Glacier National Park, Albert Canyon, and there's indicating a tunnel at this point. And I think there were probably a lot of tunnels in the area that were put in. So Flat Creek, there was quite a bit of mining in that area as well. And you can see several mining claims from the Fidelity Mountain area. This was from the 1918 Minister of Mines report, and actually showed a section through the workings of the Lanark mine. So it gives you an idea of the extent of, they were actually doing some pretty serious work in those areas. And actually digging tunnels, and they actually talked about people working in the tunnels as well. Another map of the region, and the Silver Creek East. And we have these original maps, so it was hard to get a good view of them just from my camera. And then another map of the area. The picture that came from the Woolsey family, so it's showing a trail into the Woolsey mine. Another interesting thing is Wolsey was in that area for a long time. The original David Wolsey died in the 1920s, and his sons continued to work the mines in the area after that. But we hear a lot about Nakamu Caves and the fact that they were discovered by Charles Deutschmann. But I've seen some accounts that say that the mouth of the caves were originally seen by David Wolsey and another man, Walter Scott, who had mines in the area as well. But that they didn't go into the caves. They didn't pursue it. But the Wolsey family, members of the Wolsey family, claim that it was Wolsey who actually discovered the Nakamu Caves. And I think he probably discovered the mouth of the caves, but they didn't really do any exploration in that. But when Deutschmann came across them in about 1903, he did explore the caves. So he's given credit for that discovery. And there was some work at the Albert Canyon mine in the 1930s.
Is that the Wolsey mine?
I think that was the Wolsey mine. I know I have a little bit of trouble keeping all of this straight, but there was a note in the newspaper in January of 1929 saying that Wolseys were planning a 100-ton mill for that year. So that's our assumption that this was some of the buildings attached to that mine. And in 1938, there still was mining going on in that area. It was talking about the Regal silver mine situated on Claiborne Creek, which is named after Mr. Claiborne who died. And at that point it said that there were 20 men employed in the summer with 11 men underground. It said some experimental work was being done toward making a marketable tungsten concentrate in the small underground mill of about 25 tons daily capacity. So I'm probably, it's probably one of my shorter talks, because as I say, I'm really still in the research part of that. But I was finding it quite fascinating the more I was getting into this. And as I said, there's a lot of it that it's hard for me to understand, not being from a mining background. And it was hard to keep all the locations straight. But it was interesting to, when you look on the maps and when you read the reports, just the extent of mining in that region. And I think I was hearing from Don that there was even people in there in the 1970s doing mining as well. So it continued for quite a while, off and on. But I think with a lot of mining ventures, it's hard to keep them profitable. A lot of it depends on markets, a lot of other factors. So I think a lot of these areas, they'd stop and start. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
Wolsey, is that the same Wolsey that owns the deli here?
It would be, I think, a grandfather of Dave Wolsey who owned the Little Europe Deli.
That road that was in that one picture going up the side of the, about 3 pictures there. A lot like that road that I went up. Silver Creek. Okay, dude.
Or the one with the Wolsey,
Yeah, the Wolsey.
the Wolsey Trail.
That one there.
That one.
You went up it in a what?
Pickup truck. We were sliding down it backwards, there was all that area there in the middle of the winter.
Did you have to do some road building on your way?
So does that trail still exist then?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could make it up.
Yeah,
Parkway.
on a trials block or something?
Last time I was up there, there was part of the generator shed that was left in the working finding.
Could
Yeah,
go
they got a feast on it, yeah.
I remember seeing concrete foundations from that concentrated since I've been there.
Cathy, what's the root of Lanark, the name, do you know?
It came from that. It was after the area near Ottawa where Tom Bain lived. Laurie and Lanark and Dunvegan were all from there from the towns that they lived in near Ottawa. So they were the first people in that area.
Because of course there's a snow shed, the Lanark snow shed.
Mhm.
On the highway.
Yeah, so that's where that was, as far as we can tell, that was the earliest mine in the area, was the Lanark with Thomas and Mary Ann Bain. Slender Hurt had some interesting stories of coming out and as a woman living in this very rough mining town. And they also talked about coming into town and camping at Williamson's Lake, which was in about 1889 or so. And there was nothing developed there. There was a farm on the area, Williamson's Farm, but no development on the lake. But they camped there in the winter. And Thomas Bain's partner was a man named John Boyd, and John Boyd ended up having a ranch up in the Big Bend area known as Boyd's Ranch. And he died in I think it was 1902. He and his partner were trying to go through the rapids on below where the dam is now. And their boat overturned, the two men drowned. And there was, a few years before that, his wife had brought his wife out from back east, and she was coming back to live with him at his ranch that he developed on the Big Bend, and was staying with the Bain family, and suffered a stroke and died of a stroke at the age of 26. So when you look in the surface of behind all these people, there's lots of interesting stories. I was talking about Fred Forrest, whose father had encouraged him to come to Canada. He was a real character, and when he lived at Albert Canyon, he started a newspaper called the Albert Canyon Recorder, and it's really just a little gossip sheet. And there's some, didn't bring it out today, but there's really, really funny things in there. It's all little bits of gossip. There's also this extremely wordy story called The Prospector's Dream that I believe he wrote. And the first paragraph of the story takes about like a full sheet of paper, just his first paragraph. His first sentence. It's a very, very long run-on sentence. So that was kind of the style of writing of the day. But his little newspaper was very, very funny. There's notes in there about people having somebody getting a haircut, got their beard cut off, and he also has little notes about coming in to get a subscription to the paper, and that if you try to take a newspaper, he had a shotgun handy in the office. Just all little humorous notes. So it sounded like he was quite an eccentric character.
Small question. In your reading, did you come across, when they were digging the tunnels, did they have ponies, or was it all man dug?
I haven't found that. I haven't found any information on how they dug the tunnels. That's an interesting question.
Well, it's just that amongst David's items was a little horseshoe, which looked like it came from a pony. And I'm wondering if it came from off the railway or off a mine. I don't know. But it was a small horseshoe, and it was from this area.
Okay. Well,
with it, he found a little Derringer pistol, so that's in there too. And I don't know where it came from now.
Yeah.
You got it registered?
I used to once.
Those are talented ponies, they're very
Any other comments or questions?
Well, did they mostly travel by cart with a horse, or by, they wouldn't have cars then, would they? Would go on with that?
There was no road there. There was no highway between through the Rogers Pass until 1962. So there might have been some trails, but mostly would have been like horse, or they'd go off from one of the railway stations.
And hiked in. And hiked
A lot of
in.
it was on foot. Because that fellow who fell to his death, they were just in on foot.
Makes you wonder how they would get from Albert Canyon to Woolsey Creek.
I know, eh? And
You know, when you go on the highway even today, there's a tunnel to the side.
There was a trail up Tangiers and Golden Farm Farm Pass and down into Woolsey Creek. Tried to find it.
Must have been that way, because they wouldn't ever come to follow the Illecillewaet.
Yeah, some of the older topographic maps have got those old mining trails on it.
Yeah, some of,
Regular government topographic maps. And,
yeah, some of the maps that we have, you can see some trails
Yeah,
on
yeah.
them as well, so if anybody
Then
wants to
there was
look at them,
one,
pull up some of the maps.
There was a Crown granted claim that stayed in Glacier Park for a long time up on Flat Creek, up on Slick Mountain. It used to show up on the maps. I guess they finally got it canceled.
Up at Farm Pass, there's a foundation of one of the old cabins, one of
Yep.
the wedding cabins here. A couple summers ago, I found it up there.
Where was that?
So, up at Farm Pass. So up, going up Bostock
Yep.
and then up around in there.
Right, yeah, up Boston.
Does anybody know where Claiborne Creek is? Is it an existing creek or? To see if we can find it, because I actually checked with the geographical names of BC website and it is listed, it's a gazetted creek, it's a gazetted name, so. Let's see if we can
Cathy,
find it.
I think I'll check David's photos because I remember him talking about that creek and he did a lot of excursions. Let's see if there's a lot of photos.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Is anybody still taking an interest in digging around up in that area nowadays?
Not aware of anything. Does anybody know of any existing work in that area?
Like actual mining work.
Yeah.
Or just
Not a
hobby
lot.
work, you know, hobby digging?
Well, you gotta be careful, a lot of it's in the park now.
Yeah. Yeah, the parks have changed their boundaries over the years. Yeah.
If we find
Probably a
gold,
good
we
thing.
move our boundaries.
Well,
Thank you, Cathy.
thank you very much.
Oh, so where does that come out?
It would come out of Beaton.